Dr. Maren Riker always figured she'd die doing something stupid. Like pie-eating contest levels of stupid. Instead, she found herself clinging to life aboard the USS Valiant, a ship so ghosted even the cockroaches had a better sense of adventure. "I swear, if I die here," she muttered, edging her way through the narrow passageway, "I hope my spirit gets a refund on my student loans." The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had other plans. The Valiant was supposed to be a routine salvage job. Well, as routine as boarding a derelict floating chunk of metal in the middle of nowhere could get. But when her scanner beeped like an overzealous alarm clock, she knew something was off. "Good news is, we found something," Riker said, her voice echoing in the eerie silence. "Bad news is, it's probably going to kill us." Her companion, a lifeless android she'd affectionately dubbed Tinfoil Tony, didn't respond. "Thanks for the support, Tony," she quipped, giving him a friendly pat that sent a metallic clang reverberating through the hull. If Tony could talk, he'd probably ask for a different name. But that's what you get for being a glorified paperweight. The scanner kept chirping insistently as Riker maneuvered through the ship, stepping over debris that had seen better days. The air was stale, smelling like someone had forgotten to take the trash out. Why do these places always smell like wet socks and desperation? She wondered aloud, though not really expecting an answer. As she pushed open a door marked, "Authorized personnel only," the hinges squealed like a dying banshee. Inside, amidst the detritus of a once-functioning control room, lay the jackpot. A console emanating a soft, otherworldly glow. "Well, if that ain't suspicious," she said, her sarcasm cutting through the oppressive silence like a knife. Approaching the console, Riker felt a shiver run down her spine, the kind that suggested she'd just stepped into a particularly bad joke. Probably the one where the punchline involved her meeting a sticky end. The screen flickered to life, displaying symbols that looked more like a bad acid trip than anything remotely human. "Great," she sighed, tapping at the console. "I always wanted to learn alien hieroglyphics. Right up there with self-inflicted head trauma." The screen responded, shifting to reveal schematics that made her heart skip a beat. This was tech way beyond human understanding, and from the looks of it, not exactly designed to make friends. Riker's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of a conspiracy that screamed, "Bad idea," with neon lights. She'd heard whispers, rumors, really, about something dark lurking in the shadows of power. But here, in the belly of a dead ship, was proof. Aliens in the government, she mused, guess that explains the diet sodas. With her heart thumping like a drunken drummer, she snapped pictures with her handheld device, fingers trembling slightly. "If this doesn't land me a Nobel Prize, at least it'll make a hell of a blog post," she mumbled, backing away slowly from the console. The ship groaned ominously, as if it had just remembered how to be creepy. "Time to skedaddle," she announced to no one in particular, her practical side finally overriding her curiosity. As she retraced her steps, Riker couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little longer, every creak a little louder. "Paranoia, my old friend," she whispered, clutching her device like it was the Holy Grail. "Hope you're worth it." Reaching the docking bay, she found her escape pod right where she'd left it, a reassuring sight in an otherwise miserable expedition. "Tinfoil Tony, your chariot awaits," she said, nudging the android inside. Not that he'd appreciate the gesture, but it made her feel better, like she wasn't completely alone in this cosmic joke. The POD's engines sputtered to life with all the enthusiasm of a cat in a bath. "Come on, baby," Riker coaxed, flipping switches like she actually knew what half of them did. The Valiant's docking clamps disengaged with a clunk, and she felt the pod drift free of the ship's cold embrace. As the pod hurtled away from the derelict vessel, Riker allowed herself a moment of triumph. "Suck it, ghost ship," she declared, raising a defiant fist. But the victory was short-lived as the radio crackled, a voice cutting through the static. "Dr. Riker," the voice purred, oozing with the kind of smugness that suggested its owner had never been wrong a day in their life. "We've been expecting you." "Oh, fantastic," Riker groaned, thumping the console with her fist. Like a surprise party, but with less cake and more existential dread. The voice, still annoyingly calm, continued, "You've seen too much, Doctor. Time to come in from the cold." "Yeah, well, I've got a counter-offer," Riker shot back, adrenaline sharpening her words. How about I come in from the cold when hell freezes over? The communication line went dead, leaving her with nothing but the hum of the pod and the chilling realization that she was now on someone's radar. Great, she muttered, strapping in and setting the coordinates for the nearest outpost. Just what I needed, another reason to sleep with one eye open. As the pod sped through the void, she wondered how deep the alien infiltration went. Politicians? Celebrities? Her high school math teacher who always seemed a little too interested in prime numbers. The possibilities were as endless as they were terrifying. But for now, there was only one certainty. She had the evidence, and she intended to use it. Humanity might be outmatched, outgunned, and completely oblivious, but if there was one thing Dr. Maren Riker knew, it was that humans were nothing if not stubborn. The stars streaked by, indifferent and eternal, as Riker settled into her seat. Here's to making a difference, she toasted to the void, raising an imaginary glass. Or at least dying trying. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, the universe continued on its merry way, oblivious to the tiny speck of rebellion hurtling through its infinite expanse. Back on the Valiant, the console's glow dimmed and died, leaving only shadows and silence in its wake. Whatever secrets it held, they were now Riker's cross to bear, whether she liked it or not. But the universe, as it often did, had one more card to play. As the USS Valiant floated silently, a figure emerged from the shadows, eyes glinting with a malevolent intelligence that spoke of ancient times and darker purposes. Well, the figure murmured, a ghost of a smile playing on its lips. Looks like the game's afoot. And somewhere, out in the vast cold dark, Dr. Maren Riker was about to find out just how deep that rabbit hole went. Dr. Maren Riker wasn't exactly an optimist. But if there was one thing she loved about space, it was that no one could hear you scream, or laugh, or cry in frustration when the shoddy communication systems decided to take a coffee break. Tugging at the stubborn receiver, she muttered curses under her breath that would make a space pirate blush. "Come on, you piece of junk," she snarled, smacking the comms unit like it owed her money. Static crackled defiantly, whispering sweet nothings about broken dreams and missed connections. If I wanted to be ghosted, I'd call my ex. Finally, after what felt like wrestling a particularly unruly octopus, the static cleared, replaced by a voice that sounded like gravel being fed through a blender. "Riker, you there? This better not be another prank call." "Jax, you beautiful bastard," Riker exhaled, relief flooding her like caffeine on a Monday morning. Captain Jax Varen had the kind of voice that could calm a raging bull, if that bull was also trying to sell you a used car. "Miss me?" "Like a hole in my hull," Jax replied, his tone a mix of exasperation and affection. "What's up, Maren? Last time you called, you needed bail money and a ride off a particularly hostile moon." "Yeah, well, this time it's even worse," she admitted, glancing at the data she'd stolen from the Valiant. "I've got something big, and by big, I mean, end of the world big." "Fantastic," Jax sighed, "and here I was hoping for a quiet night with a bottle of rotgut and a few bad decisions." "Look, I think the government's been infiltrated by aliens," Riker said, cutting straight to the chase. "I found tech on the Valiant that's way beyond anything we've got, and I swear it looks like they've got their tentacles in everything." Jax was silent for a moment, likely processing her words or contemplating the pros and cons of pretending the connection had dropped. "You've been watching those conspiracy vids again?" "Jax," Riker said, her voice like steel, "I'm serious. This is real. I've got proof, schematics, plans, the whole 9 yards. If we don't do something, we might as well start practicing our alien etiquette." The line was quiet, just a soft hum of static and the occasional ping of distant radiation. Then Jax's voice came through, laced with determination. "All right, let's assume you're not completely out of your mind. What's the plan?" "Meet me at Outpost Theta," Riker instructed, already feeling a touch of hope in her chest. "We'll regroup, figure out how to blow the lid off this thing. Maybe save humanity while we're at it." "Sounds like a blast," Jax deadpanned. "I'll load up the ship, see you in 24 hours. Try not to get abducted before then." "Wouldn't dream of it," Riker promised, ending the call with a flick of a switch. Her heart thudding in her chest, she allowed herself a rare smile. Jax might be an insufferable rogue with a penchant for trouble, but when the chips were down, there was no one she'd trust more. It was him, a half-decent bottle of whiskey, and maybe a prayer that they wouldn't end up as alien chow. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corridors of power, the aliens were not exactly twiddling their thumbs. In a high-rise office that screamed, corporate overlord, and smelled faintly of recycled ambition, a group of individuals that looked suspiciously like humans gathered around a polished table. At the head sat a man, or rather, a creature wearing a man-like an ill-fitting suit. His eyes glinted with something decidedly non-human, a cold intelligence that spoke of star systems conquered and civilizations erased. Dr. Riker has escaped the Valiant, he stated, his voice smooth as silk yet somehow grating on the nerves. And she has the data. A murmur of discontent rippled through the group, like a flock of pigeons realizing they've run out of breadcrumbs. Relax, the lead alien assured, waving a hand adorned with perfectly manicured nails. She's just one individual. We've come too far to let one human derail our plans. What do you propose? Another asked, eyes flickering with doubt. It's only a matter of time before she exposes us. We accelerate the timetable, the leader declared, a predatory smile curving his lips. Our assets are in place across key government sectors. We begin the takeover now. Let the humans blame themselves for their downfall. There was a pause as the implications sunk in, an unspoken understanding passing through the room. They were on the brink of a new era, one where they wouldn't have to hide in shadows and play nice. The universe had handed them the tools, and they intended to use them. Back in her cramped escape pod, Riker was engrossed in her survival routine, checking systems, scanning for hostiles, and trying to drown out the rising sense of dread with bad jokes and worse coffee. The stars outside were a blur, a reminder of just how small she was in the grand scheme of things. But she wasn't about to let that stop her. All right, Marin, she muttered to herself, rubbing her temples. You've got alien conspiracies, a target on your back, and a reunion with Jax to look forward to. Just another day in the life, huh? The pod shuddered, the engines humming with a familiarity that was almost comforting. It was like being cradled in the arms of a particularly grumpy bear, unwillingly reassuring. As the hours ticked by, she replayed her plan over and over, picking at the details like a scab that refused to heal. There was so much that could go wrong, and not nearly enough that could go right. But that was the thing about humanity. When backed into a corner, they fought tooth and nail, even if it meant biting off more than they could chew. Meanwhile, Captain Jax Varen was prepping his ship, the Midnight Wanderer, with all the grace of a man who knew how to make a hasty exit. A sleek, battered vessel with more personality than most people he knew, it was his pride and joy, though it occasionally liked to remind him who was boss by spewing coolant at inopportune moments. All right, girl, he murmured, patting the console affectionately. Let's go rescue Marin from whatever mess she's gotten herself into this time. The ship responded with a soft rumble, settling into a rhythm that spoke of warp drives and distant stars. Jax couldn't help the grin that tugged at his lips. Whatever Riker was mixed up in, it promised to be entertaining. And if there was one thing he loved more than a good drink, it was a good story. As the Wanderer slipped into the void, Jax allowed himself a moment to reflect. He'd known Riker for years, through thick and thin, through planets that tried to eat them and revolutions they'd accidentally started. If she said there was trouble, he believed her, even if that trouble sometimes came with a side of reckless abandon. Bring on the aliens, he chuckled, leaning back in his seat. I've got nothing better to do. Across the galaxy, the outpost loomed, a hunk of metal clinging to an asteroid like a tick to a particularly juicy deer. Outpost Theta had seen its share of scuffles, mostly of the drinking variety, but it was still standing, which was more than could be said for some of its patrons. Riker's pod docked with a thud, as if announcing her arrival with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. She stepped out, squinting at the harsh lights of the docking bay. It was like stepping into an old western, if westerns had spaceships and questionable hygiene. Jax was waiting for her, leaning against a support beam with the kind of casual grace that suggested he'd been practicing in front of a mirror. Nice entrance, he called, arms crossed and smirk firmly in place. Been practicing your landing skills in your spare time? Funny, Riker replied, rolling her eyes. Next time, I'll aim for your ship. Please don't, Jax laughed, falling into step beside her as they made their way deeper into the outpost. She's temperamental enough as it is. As they navigated the labyrinth of corridors, Riker filled Jax in on everything, the Valiant, the aliens, the looming threat. He listened without interrupting, though his eyebrows climbed higher with each new revelation. So, to summarize, he said, once she'd finished, we're up against a secret alien invasion, and you've managed to piss them off by stealing their homework. Pretty much, Riker acknowledged, a grim set to her mouth. Think we can take them? Do we have a choice? Jax asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as they entered the main hub. It was crowded, filled with people who looked like they'd seen better days and probably better planets. We've got the element of surprise, whatever that's worth. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people love a good underdog story. Hope you're right, Riker muttered, scanning the room for familiar faces. Otherwise, we're screwed, and not in the fun way. Jax chuckled, clapping her on the shoulder. Let's find some allies, get a plan together. We'll make it work, even if it kills us. Riker offered a wry smile. Let's aim for, even if it doesn't, yeah? They spent the next few hours gathering what resources they could, reaching out to old contacts and new faces alike. It was a ragtag team, the kind that wouldn't win any beauty contests but had just enough grit to make something of themselves. As they sat around a scratched-up table, plans and ideas thrown about like confetti at a particularly disastrous wedding, Riker felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting back, about proving that even in the face of insurmountable odds, humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. So, Jax said, leaning back and propping his feet on the table, what's the first move, boss? Riker took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of her new allies on her. We hit them where it hurts, she declared, her voice steady. Expose them for what they are, rally people to our cause. And if all else fails, we make sure they remember us. The room buzzed with a mix of anticipation and fear, an energy that spoke of desperation and hope. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Well, then, Jax said, raising an imaginary glass. To the end of the world, and the dumbasses willing to fight for it. To us, Riker agreed, clinking her non-existent glass against his. May we live long enough to regret it. As plans were set in motion and alliances forged, Riker felt a flicker of hope. The odds were staggering, the risks monumental, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't facing the darkness alone. And in the grand theater of the universe, as alien forces plotted and human hearts dared to defy them, the stage was set for a battle that would determine the fate of all. The control room of Outpost Theta was as glamorous as a model's foot after a month-long hike. Flickering lights, outdated technology, and a smell that could only be described as burnt hopes made it a less-than-ideal setting for a high-stakes decoding operation. But Dr. Marin Riker and Captain Jax Varen weren't here for the ambiance. They were here to save a planet too dumb to know it needed saving. Any chance this place comes with a user manual? Marin grumbled, poking at a console that looked about as reliable as a promise from a politician. Or did they just assume we'd figure it out by sheer force of disappointment? Jax leaned over, squinting at the mess of alien code on the screen. I think they banked on our innate ability to panic under pressure. It's a common human trait. Well, lucky for them, I'm a natural. The scanner beeped, a cheerful little sound that made both of them flinch like they'd been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Or, in this case, with their hands elbow deep in alien tech. Here we go, Marin said, her voice a mix of dread and determination. She tapped a few keys, and the screen filled with a matrix of symbols that looked like they were designed by someone who thought calculus was too easy. If I'm reading this right, and let's pretend I am, our extraterrestrial buddies have a plan to tweak some DNA and make sure their favorite politicians start dancing to their tune. Genetic engineering? Jax asked, eyebrows raised. Great, as if politics weren't enough of a genetic lottery. I know, right? And here I was thinking nepotism was the only way to climb the ladder. They worked in silence for a few moments, the quiet only broken by the occasional curse word as Marin wrestled with the controls. The tension in the room was almost physical, a living thing that settled around them like a foul-smelling blanket. Got it, Marin finally said, straightening up and giving the console a victorious slap. Here's the gist. The aliens want to replace key political figures with genetically modified lookalikes. They'll play puppet master, and humanity will be none the wiser. Jax whistled low. That's a hell of a plan. Almost makes our government seem competent by comparison. Low bar. But yeah, it's bad. We've got to stop it. Well, I always thought the best way to fight fire was with more fire, and I've got enough explosives to start a bonfire that'd make the sun jealous. That's comforting, Marin retorted dryly, flipping through more pages of alien schematics. But let's try not to blow up the whole station first. We're not that desperate. Yet, a sudden hissing sound interrupted their banter, as the door to the control room slid open with the enthusiasm of a teenager on a Monday morning. Marin and Jax turned, instinctively reaching for their sidearms, but it wasn't an alien invasion force. It was Tinfoil Tony, Marin's android companion, lurching into the room with all the grace of a drunken giraffe. "I come bearing bad news," Tony announced, his voice a monotone that somehow managed to sound both bored and ominous. "We're about to have company. Unwelcome kind." "Perfect," Marin muttered, rolling her eyes. "Because what we really needed right now was a party. Uninvited guests, at that," Jax added, checking the charge on his blaster. "How many are we talking about?" "Approximately too many," Tony replied. "Give or take a few." "That's helpful," Marin sighed, pulling up the security feed on the console. Sure enough, the screen showed a group of figures moving through the outpost, their movements too coordinated to be anything but trouble. "I think it's time we made a hasty exit." "I thought you'd never ask," Jax said, grinning in a way that suggested he was looking forward to the ensuing chaos. "What's the plan?" "Run first, think later," Marin shot back, already heading for the door. "I'll fill you in on the way." As they sprinted through the corridors, Marin filled Jax in on the details of the alien plan, the words tumbling out of her mouth like marbles down a set of stairs. It wasn't a perfect plan, hell, it wasn't even a good plan, but it was all they had. "You know," Jax said, breathless but still annoyingly calm, "it occurs to me that if we survive this, we'll probably have to stick our necks out and save the politicians." Marin shot him a sidelong glance. "Yeah, well, nobody's perfect. Even us." They skidded into a junction, nearly colliding with a pair of alien agents. Lean, menacing, and sporting the kind of fashion sense that screamed, "Evil overlord wannabe," they leveled their weapons at Marin and Jax. "Get down," Jax shouted, pulling Marin behind a column as blaster fire sizzled through the air where their heads had been. "Friendly bunch, aren't they?" Marin quipped, returning fire with lethal efficiency. One alien fell, but the other ducked behind cover, returning fire with interest. "You'd think with all their technology, they could at least program a sense of humor," Jax noted, his shots forcing the alien to keep its head down. "Guess that's one thing they can't engineer." The firefight was short, brutal, and left the hallway looking like a set from an action movie. As the last alien fell, Marin and Jax took a moment to catch their breath. "Well, that was fun," Jax said, surveying the carnage. "But we should probably keep moving before they send the B-team." "Agreed." "Tony, lead the way," Marin ordered, falling into step behind the android as they resumed their escape. "As you wish," Tony intoned, lurching forward with all the urgency of a hungover sloth. They reached the docking bay without further incident, though the clanging of alarms and shouts of more alien agents suggested that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. "Time to blow this popsicle stand," Jax said, rushing up the ramp to his ship, the Midnight Wanderer. "Hope you brought your spacesuit." Marin rolled her eyes, tapping at the comms unit. "Always do. You never know when you'll need to make a quick exit." As the Wanderer's engines roared to life, Marin and Jax strapped in, ready for whatever came next. The ship shuddered as it lifted off, the outpost shrinking to a speck behind them. "Any bright ideas for how we stop an alien takeover?" Jax asked, his hands dancing over the controls. "Because I'm fresh out," Marin sighed, her mind racing. "We need to find a way to expose them. Show humanity what they're up against before it's too late." "How do we do that?" "We get evidence. We've got the decoding, but we need something solid that will get people to take this seriously." "Like a captured alien?" Jax suggested, half joking. "Exactly," Marin replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "And I think I know just where to get one." Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "You never cease to amaze, Marin. Here's to saving the world." "Again. Just another day at the office," Marin replied, watching the stars streak by as they plotted a course for their next destination. In the silence that followed, they both knew the road ahead would be difficult, full of danger and uncertainty. But that was par for the course. It wasn't the first time they'd faced impossible odds, and it wouldn't be the last. "Hey, Marin?" Jax asked, breaking the quiet. Yeah? If we don't make it, we will, she interrupted, her voice firm. And when we do, drinks are on you. Deal, Jax agreed, a grin on his face. But only if you promise not to destroy my ship in the process. No promises, Marin shot back, laughter in her voice. But I'll do my best. The Wanderer slipped into hyperspace, leaving the chaos of Outpost Theta behind. Ahead lay the unknown, a challenge for the brave and the foolhardy. But as long as they had each other, they were ready to face whatever the universe threw at them. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to save their world from itself, and from the aliens who thought they could outsmart humanity. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was proving the universe wrong in the most spectacular ways possible. The Midnight Wanderer rattled through hyperspace like a worn-out shopping cart with a wobbly wheel. Marin Riker sat in the co-pilot's chair, trying to ignore the groaning sound from the bulkheads that suggested they might spontaneously decompress at any moment. Space travel. It was as glamorous as ever. We really need to upgrade this rust bucket, Marin noted, squinting at the control panel as if her glare alone could keep it from exploding. Unless you're trying to qualify for Worst Ship of the Year? Jax Varon, master of barely functional space vehicles, was in his element. Hey, it's not the size of the ship, it's how badly it breaks down that counts. Nice to see you have your priorities straight. Always, Jax grinned, punching a few controls with the grace of a gorilla playing piano. What's next on our Save the World checklist? Find allies, preferably ones who don't want to murder us. Tall order, but I know a guy. Or more accurately, a bunch of guys who know guys. The rebellion's got a few cells still active. If anyone's willing to help, it's them. Though they'll probably want payment up front. And by payment, I mean a hell of a lot more than a thank you card. The rebellion. Last bastion of those who thought the galaxy could actually be worse, and were doing their best to make it so. Still, they had connections, resources, and a knack for staying one step ahead of total annihilation. Most days, anyway. They're not exactly reliable, Marin said, leaning back and feigning relaxation. Remember the last time you dealt with them? You came back with a black eye, a hangover, and I swear you lost an eyebrow. Jax shrugged. Occupational hazards. Besides, I can be very persuasive when I want to be. Which is to say, I can run fast. Reassuring. Glad you think so. Jax activated the comms unit, which crackled to life with all the clarity of a broken toy radio. This is the Midnight Wanderer calling Rebel Cell 13. Requesting a meeting, preferably without hostilities this time. The response was immediate and predictably cryptic. Wanderer, this is Cell 13. Meet us at coordinates redacted. Come alone, and don't bring any homicidal androids. Marin gave Tony a sidelong glance. You hear that, Tony? You're not invited to the party. Tony, who had been standing motionless in the corner like a metal scarecrow, finally spoke. It's discrimination. Just because I'm a superior form of life doesn't mean I'm homicidal. Just malfunctioning, Marin quipped. Precisely. All right, Tony, you keep watch over the ship. Make sure it doesn't spontaneously combust while we're gone. Understood. I shall ensure the ship remains in its current state of disrepair. Jax entered the coordinates. Let's go make some new friends. The meeting point was the kind of place villains in stories always showed up. Dark, damp, and with about as much charm as a politician's promise. An abandoned mining station floated in space, its lights flickering like a moth in a bug zapper. It was a perfect setting for an ambush. What do you think? Jax asked as they docked, peering out the viewport. Is this the part where they betray us? Probably, Marin replied, but we're not their usual targets. They like to be unpredictable. Great, I love surprises. The docking hatch opened with a reluctant hiss, and they stepped into the station, weapons ready but holstered. The air was thick with the smell of rust and old secrets. A figure emerged from the shadows, clad in the kind of cloak that screamed, definitely up to no good, and approached with the weary grace of someone who had seen too much and survived it all. Captain Varon, the cloaked figure greeted, voice smooth as oil on ice. Dr. Riker, you're far from home. Can't say it's by choice, Dace, Jax replied, crossing his arms. We're here for a favor. Dace, leader of the cell and part-time smuggler, smirked. Everyone comes to us for favors. What makes you think you're special? Because we have intel that says the aliens are going to replace key political figures with genetically modified clones. Thought that might perk your interest. Dace's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked toward Marin. And you're telling me this why? Because we're not big fans of alien overlords, Marin said, her tone as dry as the air. And because we need your help to stop them. And what's in it for us? Besides not being ruled by aliens? Jax asked. Dace chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Fine, we'll help, but betrayal comes with the territory in this line of work. You're just going to have to trust us. Trust you? Marin echoed, incredulous. I'd sooner trust a politician with my life savings. You say that like politicians have savings, Jax remarked. Pretty sure they just have offshore accounts. Point taken. Dace led them into a dimly lit room filled with screens and maps. Ragtag rebels moved about, their faces marked by exhaustion and determination. Marin and Jax were given a spot at a makeshift table. Here's what we know, Dace began, motioning to a map. The alien command structure is centralized on Sigma Prime. We've been monitoring their movements, and it's clear they've got something big planned. How big? Jax asked. Imagine the biggest thing you can think of, Dace replied. Then double it. Subtle. So how do we get there? Marin asked. That's where the fun begins, Dace said with a conspiratorial grin. We've got a ship and a pilot who can get you past their defenses. And what's the catch? Jax asked, suspicion lacing his words. Dace spread his hands. No catch. Not yet, anyway. Comforting. The discussion continued, plans forming and falling apart in equal measure. The rebels were resourceful, but also dangerously unpredictable. Their assets were limited, their loyalties thin as a politician's promises, but they were willing to take the risk. For now, just as they were finalizing their plans, a sharp alarm blared, the lights flickering to an angry red. Looks like we've got company, Jax said, drawing his blaster. And not the friendly kind. Dace, a rebel shouted, breathless and wide-eyed. We've been betrayed. There's an agent among us. Oh, terrific, Marin muttered, rolling her eyes. Because things were going so smoothly. The room erupted into chaos as rebels scrambled, weapons drawn, eyes darting for the traitor among them. Marin and Jax exchanged a glance, their thoughts in unison. Typical. Who's the rat? Dace demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. I don't know, the rebel replied, panic edging his tone. But they've already triggered a signal. We've got enemy ships inbound. Dace swore, a colorful string of curses that would have impressed even the most hardened space pirate. We need to move, now. Where's your pilot? Jax asked, covering Dace as they made for the exit. Gone. Dace spat, bitterness in his voice. They got to him first. Well, that's just perfect, Marin said, laying down cover fire as they headed back to the docking bay. Guess it's just us then. The lights continued to flash, casting the station in a hellish glow. The sound of boots pounding on metal echoed through the corridors, accompanied by the occasional blaster shot. You sure know how to pick your friends, Jax, Marin said, dodging a shot that left a smoking scar on the wall behind her. I mean, what's next? A tea party with the enemy? Only if you promise to bring cake, Jax shot back, returning fire with a grim smile. The docking bay was a scene of organized chaos, rebels scrambling to their ships, alarms wailing like banshees. Marin and Jax sprinted up the ramp of the Midnight Wanderer, Dace hot on their heels. Get us out of here, Dace yelled, slamming the hatch shut as the station shuddered from incoming fire. On it, Jax replied, flipping switches and hitting controls with the urgency of a man late for his own execution. The engines roared to life, the ship lurching forward as it detached from the station. The view outside was a swirling mess of fire and debris, enemy ships closing in like sharks scenting blood. Tony, divert power to the shields, Marin ordered, bracing herself against the console. Diverting power, Tony replied, his monotone voice somehow managing to convey both boredom and annoyance. The Wanderer shot forward, weaving through the chaos with the kind of reckless abandon that suggested its pilot had a death wish. Jax, it seemed, was in his element. Where to now? Jax asked, glancing over at Marin. Sigma Prime, Marin replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. We need to stop this before it gets any worse. Right, Jax agreed, setting course. Let's go crash their party. Just try not to break the ship in the process, Dace added, a touch of humor in his voice despite the dire circumstances. No promises, Jax grinned, as the Wanderer leapt back into hyperspace, leaving behind a trail of chaos and betrayal. As the stars streaked past, Marin couldn't help but reflect on the situation. Here they were, flying headfirst into yet another impossible mission, with allies they couldn't trust and enemies at every turn. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was surviving the unsurvivable. Hey, Marin, Jax called, breaking her from her thoughts. When this is all over, what do you say we take a vacation? Somewhere nice, with a beach, and no homicidal aliens, Marin chuckled, shaking her head. Sounds perfect, but first, let's save the universe. Again, Jax echoed, with all the enthusiasm of a man who knew he had no other choice. And so they flew on, into the unknown, armed with nothing but a battered ship, a sarcastic android, and the unshakable belief that no matter what the universe threw their way, they'd find a way to come out on top. Even if it killed them. The Midnight Wanderer hurtled through hyperspace like a drunk stumbling through a dark alley, zigzagging with questionable grace, guided by Jax's unfaltering hands. Marin sat in the co-pilot seat, sifting through the latest data on alien activities. The screen flickered with information as unsettling as a politician's expense report. Jax glanced over. How's our impending doom looking? Bleaker than a coal miner's lung, Marin replied, rubbing her temples. The aliens are moving faster than we thought. Their cloning tech isn't just to replace a few politicians. It's a full-blown takeover plan. Well, isn't that just the cherry on top? Jax muttered, adjusting their course. We're going to be dodging more than just speeding tickets if we don't hurry. Dace loomed in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled frustration. We got any good news? If you consider we're not dead yet as good news, sure, Marin said, not looking up from the screen. But give it a minute. Dace snorted, his mood darker than the space outside. I swear, every time I think I've seen the worst of it, the universe says, hold my beer. The ship jolted, a shudder running through its battered frame. Tony's voice crackled over the comms from wherever his android self was stationed. Shields holding at 60%. I would suggest avoiding any more impacts unless you enjoy floating in the vacuum of space. Tony, I've always known you for your optimism, Jax replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Any chance you could give us a motivational speech? Certainly, Tony replied without a beat. If you're going through hell, keep going. Just know there's a 90% chance you won't make it out alive. Cheery, Dace mumbled, slumping into a seat. What's the plan, then? Get to Sigma Prime, punch some aliens, save the day, Jax said, almost believing it himself. Or die trying. You know, the usual. Marin tapped a few more keys, eyes narrowing at the screen. Looks like they've got a blockade around the planet. Heavily armed, trigger-happy, and with enough firepower to make a sun blush. Great, Jax said, because I was hoping we'd get shot at today. Dace leaned forward, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. We've got contacts on the planet. Old rebels who've been lying low. If we can get a message through, they might help us. And how do you propose we do that? Marin asked. Send a strongly worded letter? Something like that, Dace replied, pulling out a small device from his coat. Signal scrambler. It'll mask our transmission long enough to get a message through. Let's hope your friends are still as friendly as you remember, Jax said, eyeing the device with skepticism. Marin connected the device to the comms unit, her fingers dancing over the keys to patch through a message. Here goes nothing. And by nothing, I mean probably our last chance. As the transmission went out, Tony's voice interrupted. Incoming message. Unsanctioned broadcast from the surface. The screen filled with static before resolving into the image of a woman with steely eyes and an expression that could curdle milk. This is Commander Durrell. We received your message. If you're here to help, you'd better be ready to fight. Looks like your old friends still remember you, Jax said, grinning at Dace. Dace nodded grimly. Commander Durrell doesn't forget. If she's in, we've got a fighting chance. Then I guess it's time to crash their little party, Marin said, setting a course for Sigma Prime. As they neared the planet, the blockade loomed ahead, a twisted metal web of destruction. Jax tightened his grip on the controls, his focus unyielding. Ready for some fancy flying, Marin? Always, Marin replied, her voice steady. The Wanderer shot forward, ducking and weaving through the blockade with the agility of a cat avoiding a bath. The alien ships responded, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly intent. Jax grinned, adrenaline coursing through his veins. They really don't like us, do they? Can't imagine why, Marin quipped, her eyes scanning the readouts. We're such charming guests. As they breached the blockade, the planet's surface came into view, a sprawling cityscape marred by the scars of war. Smoke rose from the horizon, casting the landscape in a grim tableau of destruction. Touching down in 3, Jax announced, guiding the ship towards a clearing marked by flares. The Wanderer landed with a thud, the hull groaning in protest. Marin unbuckled her harness, glancing at Jax. Let's make this quick. I'd rather not be here when their reinforcements arrive. Agreed, Jax said, grabbing his blaster. They disembarked, the air thick with tension. Commander Durrell waited, flanked by a squad of rebels. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the newcomers. Dace, she said, not bothering to hide her surprise. Still alive, I see. More or less, Dace replied. Thanks for the warm welcome. She nodded, her gaze shifting to Marin and Jax. You're the ones causing all this trouble? Depends on your definition of trouble, Jax said with a wry smile. We prefer to think of it as proactive problem solving. Whatever you call it, we've got a fight on our hands, Durrell said, motioning for them to follow. Intel says the aliens are gearing up for a last-ditch effort. They know we're here. Then let's not disappoint them, Marin replied, her resolve hardening. They moved through the war-torn city, the sounds of distant gunfire and explosions forming a grim symphony. The rebels navigated the ruins with the ease of those who'd spent too long in the shadow of conflict. Feels like old times, Dace said, his voice laced with nostalgia. Yeah, except this time, the stakes are higher, Durrell replied, her tone unyielding. As they approached the alien stronghold, the enormity of their task loomed, an immense fortress of alien architecture, pulsating with otherworldly light. A symbol of everything they were fighting against. Jax whistled low. They sure don't do subtle, do they? Wouldn't fit with their world domination agenda, Marin replied, checking her weapon. Durrell turned, her expression solemn. We hit them hard and fast. Take out their command center, disrupt their operations. It's our best shot. Let's hope it's enough, Marin said, her gaze steely. The assault began, rebels charging forward with a fervor born of desperation. Gunfire and explosions filled the air, chaos reigning as they pushed towards the fortress. Jax and Marin fought side by side, their movements synchronized in the madness. Dace and Durrell led the charge, their determination unyielding. As they breached the fortress, the interior was a labyrinth of alien design, all angles and harsh light. The corridors echoed with the sounds of battle, rebels clashing with alien forces in a desperate bid for survival. Looks like we've got their attention, Jax said, ducking behind cover as alien fire scorched the walls. Good. Let's keep it that way, Marin replied, returning fire. They pressed on, deeper into the fortress, the odds stacked against them. The rebels fought with a tenacity that only those with nothing left to lose could muster, but the alien forces were relentless, their technology a brutal testament to their superiority. As they neared the command center, the resistance grew fiercer, alien soldiers pouring in from every direction. The rebels faltered, their numbers dwindling under the onslaught. This is what we signed up for, Durrell shouted over the din, rallying her troops. We knew the risks. We make it count. Her words spurred them on, a desperate last push towards their goal. But the aliens were prepared, their defenses impenetrable, and as the rebels wavered, hope dwindled. Marin and Jax found themselves pinned down, the din of battle a cacophony around them. Jax glanced at Marin, a wry smile on his lips despite the direness of their circumstances. Fancy a vacation now? Marin laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Sure, right after we save the universe. Their banter was cut short as the aliens redoubled their efforts, pushing the rebels back. The walls closed in, the prospect of failure looming closer with every second. Dace, Durrell called, her voice cutting through the chaos. We need to fall back. Regroup. No, Dace shouted, his voice raw with defiance. We can do this. We have to. Marin looked at him, seeing the desperation that mirrored her own. He's right. We can't just give up. Jax nodded, determination flaring anew. Then let's make it count. Together, they rallied, pressing forward with renewed vigor. The command center was within reach, a tantalizing glimpse of victory against impossible odds. But victory, it seemed, was a fickle mistress. Just as hope began to flicker, a fresh wave of alien reinforcements surged, overwhelming the rebels with sheer numbers. Marin's heart sank as the realization hit. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the brink of defeat. Despair clawed at her, a dark specter whispering of failure. Yet even in the darkest hour, there was a spark, a glimmer of resilience that refused to be extinguished. The rebels fought on, driven by the knowledge that though the odds were impossible, they still had a chance. Because in the end, that was all they needed. A chance to turn the tide, to defy the odds and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. To prove, against all evidence, that humanity was not so easily conquered. And so they fought, with every ounce of strength and stubbornness they could muster, determined to make their stand count. Against all logic, all reason, they clung to the hope that the universe, in its infinite unpredictability, might just smile upon them one last time. Marin Riker had seen a lot of things she wished she hadn't. Alien battlefields, the inside of Jax's fridge, and once, a politician's campaign ad that nearly convinced her to move to a non-existent utopia. But nothing was quite as unsettling as the blaring console that danced with symbols like a drunk trying to lead a conga line. She squinted at the alien tech, her brain a disjointed mess of caffeine, sleep deprivation, and a healthy dose of, oh hell no. This thing's got more secrets than a politician's tax returns, she muttered, fingers flying over the keys with a determination born of desperation. Jax, leaning against a wall that looked like it lost a fight with a demolition crew, glanced over. Finding anything that won't make us wish we were already dead? Marin snorted. Maybe. Depends if you consider a potential exploit in their genetic manipulation tech a good thing. Jax's eyebrows shot up, disappearing into his mess of unkempt hair. Do I consider a way to stick it to the aliens who want to screw us over a good thing? Yeah, Marin, I think I do. From somewhere to the right, Dace let out a low whistle. You're saying we can hit him where it hurts? Disrupt their whole takeover plan? Exactly, Marin said, eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and dread. They've been altering DNA like a kid with a new chemistry set. But from what I can tell, there's a vulnerability. Something we can exploit to throw a big ol' wrench in their plans. Tony, the android who was about as lively as a tax auditor, chose that moment to chime in. You know, humans usually charge for this level of drama. Maybe we should start selling tickets. Yeah, maybe we can sell enough to buy you a personality upgrade, Jax shot back, a grin tugging at his lips. Marin tapped a few more keys, her brain a whirlwind of possibilities. If we can disrupt their genetic sequences, it could destabilize their operations. They rely on this tech to keep control, and pulling the plug on it could send them into chaos. Like when you disconnect a toddler from their tablet, Dace added. Exactly, except with more explosions and less screaming for snacks, Marin agreed. Durrell, who had been listening with the kind of intensity usually reserved for bomb squads and mothers of teens, finally spoke up. So how do we do it? We get into their command center and upload a virus, Marin said. It'll spread through their systems faster than gossip in a small town. Dace nodded, his expression grim but determined. Then that's what we'll do. Hit them fast, hit them hard. Jax cracked his knuckles. And if we screw this up, at least we can say we gave it the old college try. Marin sighed, glancing around at her ragtag band of misfits. All right, folks, let's get ready to ruin some alien days. The rebels moved with a renewed sense of purpose, grim resolve etched into every line of their faces. It wasn't much, but it was hope, and in a universe hell-bent on destroying them, that was enough. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the alien fortress, each twist and turn a potential death trap. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made your skin itch and your stomach churn. As they approached the command center, the hum of alien machinery grew louder, a constant reminder of the stakes. Jax glanced at Marin, his voice low. You sure about this? No more sure than I am about anything else, she admitted. But it's the best shot we've got. No pressure then, he said, flashing a grin that was all bravado. Marin checked her blaster, the weight of it both comforting and ominous. Just another day at the office, right? Right, Jax agreed, though they both knew this was anything but ordinary. The doors to the command center loomed ahead, a testament to alien arrogance with their intricate designs and intimidating size. Durrell motioned for them to hold, her eyes scanning the area for any nasty surprises. "All right, let's do this," she said, determination burning in her eyes. Marin took a deep breath, steeling herself. Here goes nothing. They burst into the command center, guns blazing, and all hell broke loose. Alien soldiers scrambled to respond, but the rebels moved with a desperation that bordered on madness. Marin dove for a console, fingers flying as she worked to upload the virus that could change everything. The room was chaos, gunfire and curses mingling in a symphony of destruction. "How's it going, Marin?" Jax called, firing at an alien who'd been stupid enough to poke its head out. "Just about there," she replied, praying to any cosmic deity that might be listening. Dace and Durrell worked to hold off the reinforcements, every shot a testament to their refusal to back down. Tony, ever the opportunist, provided cover fire with mechanical precision. The console beeped, a sound Marin had come to associate with either salvation or damnation. "Got it," she yelled, adrenaline spiking. Now would be a good time to run. Durrell shouted, already moving towards the exit. With the virus spreading through the alien systems, the command center erupted into chaos, alarms blaring and lights flickering. The ground shook as alien machinery malfunctioned, the fortress groaning like a dying beast. They bolted for the exit, every step a testament to their will to survive. Behind them, the command center imploded, a testament to the rebels' defiance. "Let's hope that did the trick," Dace said, panting as they regrouped outside. Marin nodded, trying to catch her breath. "It will. Just give it time." Jax glanced at the sky, where alien ships struggled to maintain formation. "Looks like it's working," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "For now, anyway," Tony added, his tone as deadpan as ever. Durrell looked at them, a rare smile breaking through her stern exterior. "You did good," Marin shrugged, trying to downplay the sudden rush of pride. "We all did." As the alien forces faltered, the rebels pressed their advantage, pushing back with a ferocity born of desperation and hope. "Looks like the universe might just have a sense of humor after all," Jax said, watching as the aliens scrambled to regain control. Marin laughed, a sound that was as much relief as it was amusement. "Let's hope it keeps laughing long enough for us to finish the job." The rebels regrouped, their numbers bolstered by the arrival of reinforcements inspired by their success. The tide had turned, if only for a moment, and they intended to seize it with both hands. "Here's to making a mockery of alien plans," Dace said, raising an imaginary glass. "And to surviving another day," Marin added, her eyes on the horizon where the future waited, uncertain but full of possibility. In the end, it wasn't just about winning, even though that would be nice. It was about showing the universe that, against all odds, humanity had a fighting chance. Because in a world where everything was trying to kill them, where even the smallest victory felt monumental, sometimes a chance was all you needed. As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, Marin couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. It was a fragile thing, easily snuffed out by reality, but it was there all the same. "Ready to kick some more alien ass?" Jax asked, clapping her on the shoulder. Marin grinned, her determination renewed. Always. Together, they moved forward, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. It wasn't going to be easy, but if there was one thing Marin had learned, it was that sometimes the best things in life never were. With their sights set on the alien forces, the rebels charged into the fray once more, determined to make their stand count. And somewhere, in the vastness of space, the universe watched and waited, eager to see what humanity would do next. The Midnight Wanderer limped through hyperspace, a tin can held together by duct tape and wishful thinking. The crew was silent, their minds heavy with the taste of close calls and barely avoided deaths. The kind of silence that only comes after a lot of noise, like a bar brawl that leaves everyone too tired to keep fighting. Marin Riker leaned back in her seat, staring at the ceiling. "Well, that went better than expected." Jax Varon, her partner in crime and questionable life choices, snorted. "If by better you mean we're still breathing, yeah, sure." "Breathing's good," Marin mused. "Doesn't pay the bills, but it's a start." Dace, who had been nursing a bruise that looked like he'd tried to headbutt a steel beam, chimed in, his voice as dry as a desert. We should charge these aliens. Call it a consultancy fee for showing them how to properly screw everything up. Maybe they'd pay us in those fancy glowing trinkets they love so much, Tony the android added, his tone that special blend of sarcasm and monotony that only a machine could pull off. They'd probably just clone us instead. Save on fees, Jack said, stretching his legs out in front of him. No one ever said aliens were smart. The ship's comms unit crackled to life, its voice a static-laden whisper of urgency. Rebels, this is Command. Status update. Marin leaned forward, pressing the button to speak. Command, this is Riker. We've got the virus in their system. It's spreading like a bad rumor at a family reunion. A pause, then Command's voice returned, tinged with cautious optimism. And the alien leaders? Still ugly, still plotting, but they're losing their grip, Marin replied. We're seeing their ships go haywire. It won't be long before they're too busy pulling their own hair out to bother with us. Copy that, Command said. Keep us posted. Command out. The comms unit went silent, leaving behind the comforting hum of the ship's engines. Durrell, who had been sitting quietly with an expression that suggested she was reevaluating every choice that led her to this point, finally spoke. So what now? Now, Marin said, we wait for the fireworks. The plan was simple, like stabbing someone in the back in a dark alley. They'd spread the virus through the aliens' genetic networks, disrupting their ability to control and manipulate the DNA of the politicians they'd been puppeteering. If all went well, and that was a big if, human leaders would regain control, and maybe, just maybe, they'd be able to kick the aliens off their backs. Think it'll work? Dace asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Marin shrugged, her expression a mix of hope and cynicism. We've done all we can. Now it's up to the universe. And maybe a little luck. Jax chuckled. Luck, huh? We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now. The ship's viewport flickered to life, displaying the vastness of space dotted with stars that seemed to twinkle with malicious glee. In the distance, the alien mothership loomed like a bloated tick ready to burst. That's our target, Tony said, unnecessarily. Yeah, Tony, we got it. The giant floating death trap, Jax replied, rolling his eyes. Marin studied the screen, her mind racing with possibilities. They'd have to get close enough to deliver the final blow. It was a suicide mission, but what wasn't these days? We'll need to create a distraction, she said, thinking out loud. Something big enough to keep them busy while we sneak in. Jax raised an eyebrow. You thinking what I'm thinking? If it involves explosions, then yes, Marin replied with a smirk. Dace sighed, leaning back in his seat. I'm starting to see a pattern with you too. And it usually ends with something on fire. Hey, fire's just a chemical reaction, Jax said, shrugging. And we're all about reactions. Marin stood, stretching her limbs and cracking her knuckles. All right, let's get ready. We've got an alien party to crash. The crew set to work, each of them moving with a determination that bordered on madness. They prepped the ship, checking weapons, systems, and anything else that might decide to give up at the worst possible moment. As they approached the alien mothership, the tension in the air was tangible, like the smell of ozone before a storm. Jax guided the ship with a steady hand, his eyes locked on the colossal structure ahead. All right, here's the plan, Marin said, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing inside her. We get in, plant the explosives, and get out before they realize just how badly we've screwed them over. Durrell nodded, her expression unreadable. And if we don't make it? Then we haunt the bastards, Jax said with a grin. Sounds like a plan, Dace muttered, checking his blaster one last time. As they neared the mothership, the alien defenses kicked into high gear, lasers and missiles lighting up the void. The Midnight Wanderer ducked and weaved, a clumsy dancer in a deadly ballet. Hold on to your butts, Jax yelled, jerking the controls as they narrowly avoided a particularly nasty-looking plasma burst. They slipped through the defenses, the mothership looming larger until it filled their view. Marin's heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline singing in her veins. Let's do this, she said, steeling herself. The ship docked with a shuddering thud, metal scraping against metal. The crew moved quickly, boarding the alien vessel with the kind of reckless abandon that only comes when you've got nothing left to lose. Inside, the halls were a twisted nightmare of alien architecture, sharp angles, glowing symbols, and a smell that could only be described as old cheese and disappointment. This place is a maze, Tony remarked, his mechanical eyes scanning the surroundings. Good thing I've got a map, Marin replied, tapping her temple. And a stubborn refusal to die. Together, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps echoing ominously. They passed rooms filled with alien tech, each piece more baffling than the last. I'll never understand how they make any of this work, Dace said, eyeing a console that looked like it might bite him if he got too close. Magic, probably, Jax replied, his tone dismissive. Or just really good at faking it. They reached the mothership's core, a massive chamber pulsating with energy. The heart of the beast, and their target. All right. Plant the charges, Marin instructed, her voice steady as she stifled the urge to run screaming in the opposite direction. Durrell and Dace set to work, placing the explosives with practiced precision. Marin watched, her nerves stretched taut as a wire. Think the universe is still laughing? Jax asked, his voice breaking the silence. Marin managed a smile. If it is, we better make sure it dies laughing. The charges were set, each one a promise of destruction. They moved quickly, their footsteps quickening as the seconds ticked down. Time to go, Marin said, her voice tinged with urgency. They retraced their steps, the corridors seeming more oppressive now, as if the ship itself knew its end was near. As they reached the docking bay, the aliens finally caught on, alarms blaring and soldiers scrambling to intercept them. Company's here, Tony remarked, raising his weapon. Dace fired, the sound echoing in the confined space. Let's not stick around for small talk. The crew fought their way back, every step a battle, every breath a struggle. Marin's heart was a drumbeat of terror and determination, propelling her forward. They reached the ship, boarding as quickly as they could. Jax fired up the engines, the Midnight Wanderer roaring to life like a beast awakened. Punch it, Marin yelled, the urgency in her voice undeniable. The ship lurched forward, tearing free from the mothership's grasp. Behind them, the charges detonated, the explosion rocking the alien vessel with a force that could be felt even from the safety of their retreating ship. The mothership's core imploded, a brilliant flash of light consuming it from within. The shockwave rippled through space, a testament to their defiance. That'll leave a mark, Jax said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Marin watched the destruction unfold, a mix of awe and disbelief washing over her. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd struck a blow that would resonate throughout the galaxy. Think the universe got the joke? Tony asked, his tone as dry as ever. If it didn't, we sure as hell did, Dace replied, his expression one of grim satisfaction. The crew watched as the alien forces faltered, their ranks thrown into disarray. The tide had turned, and humanity was fighting back with a vengeance. As they made their escape, Marin allowed herself a moment of hope, a fragile, flickering thing, but real nonetheless. They'd bought themselves time, a chance to regroup and reclaim what was theirs. Here's to us, Jax said, raising an imaginary glass. And to making a mockery of alien plans. Marin grinned, nodding in agreement. And to surviving another day. The crew settled into the worn-out seats of the Midnight Wanderer, their spirits buoyed by the hope of what they'd accomplished. The universe was still out there, vast and dangerous, but they'd shown it what humanity was capable of. And sometimes, a chance was all you needed. The aftermath of blowing up an alien mothership is about as glamorous as you'd expect. Think less, heroes basking in glory. And more, scrambling to clean up a mess before anyone notices. The Midnight Wanderer, creaking like an old man with arthritis, limped back toward human-controlled space. On board, Marin Riker was trying to figure out how to prevent the world from collapsing into paranoid chaos. Command, this is Riker, she said into the comms unit, which crackled with a sound like someone crumpling a paper bag. The big ugly's gone boom. What's next, besides a medal ceremony and a ticker tape parade? Command's voice, filled with that lovely bureaucratic blend of boredom and authority, came through. Congratulations on surviving. We've got containment teams en route to help mop up the remaining alien forces. Your new directive is to help us ensure they don't get cute with their infiltration strategies again. Containment teams, huh? Jax muttered beside her, his hands steady on the controls. That's code for, let's paper over the cracks and hope nobody looks too close, isn't it? You know it, Marin replied, pushing a lock of hair behind her ear with a sigh. But hey, it's not like we have a monopoly on bad ideas. As the ship sailed through the dark, starry void, Marin pulled up the latest intel on her console, which was about as reliable as a drunk navigator. Looks like the suits have decided that a little vigilance might be in order. About time, too. Vigilance? Dace piped up from the back, his leg propped up on a crate, the bandage on his leg looking like a white flag of surrender. The kind of vigilance that involves more cameras watching us than keeping an eye on the aliens? Marin shrugged. Probably. After all, what's personal privacy compared to the possibility of an alien overlord makeover? Jax smirked, hands deftly guiding the ship. I mean, if aliens wanted to make us all look like them, they'd have to dumb down their aesthetics quite a bit. The console beeped, a reminder that even in space, you couldn't escape the nagging of technology. I've got a message from one of the higher-ups, Marin said. Apparently, there's a summit planned to discuss our little victory. They want us to attend. Great, another meeting where they'll pat themselves on the back and hand out more paperwork than a legal thriller, Jax grumbled. Maybe they'll even serve stale donuts. Dream big, Captain, Marin said, rolling her eyes. Their banter was interrupted as the ship's sensors picked up the telltale signs of approaching vessels. The containment teams, sleek and shiny against the backdrop of space, were en route to their position. It was time to put on their game faces and pretend they hadn't just performed cosmic vandalism. As they docked at Outpost Theta, a collection of hastily assembled prefabs that looked like a child's attempt at building with blocks, Marin couldn't help but think that this was a moment where history might pivot. And like most pivots, it was awkward, unbalanced, and likely to leave someone falling on their face. Inside, the flickering lights did their best impression of a horror movie set. The control room was filled with humans and a few androids, whose expressions, or lack thereof, were obviously programmed to reflect mild interest. Ah, here they are, the saviors of humankind, announced a pudgy man in a suit that seemed to fit as comfortably as a straitjacket. I'm Counselor Violent, Riker, Marin replied, offering a nod. And this is Captain Jax Varen. Jax gave a half-hearted wave. Captain, hero, desperately in need of a vacation. Violent's smile was about as genuine as a politician's promise. We're grateful for your efforts. You've given us an opportunity to reassert control and prevent further alien meddling. Glad to help, Marin said, folding her arms. Although I have to ask, what's the plan to keep them from trying this again? Besides hoping they get bored and leave us alone? Violent cleared his throat, a sound like a cat coughing up a hairball. We're increasing surveillance, improving communication protocols, and deploying specialized teams to monitor any suspicious activities. In other words, you're closing the barn door after the horse has not only bolted but signed a movie deal about its escape, Jax remarked. Violent shifted uncomfortably, like a man regretting his choice of shoes. It's a start, and your insights will be invaluable in refining our strategies. Marin exchanged a glance with Jax, a silent acknowledgement that nothing changes faster than a politician's plans. But for now, it was all they had. Well, if you've got any plans that don't involve turning us into a surveillance state, feel free to share, Dace said, limping slightly as he joined them. Otherwise, we'll be here enjoying the light show. With the summit looming, Marin and Jax found themselves thrust into the role of reluctant diplomats. Their mission was clear. Ensure that humanity stayed united, vigilant, and a step ahead of any potential alien subterfuge. On the way out, Tony, the android who'd been silent up till now, decided to contribute. You know, if this whole saving the world thing doesn't work out, I hear there's a vacancy for a new galactic despot. Tempting, Marin said with a smirk. But I think I'd rather stick to my day job. The summit was held on Sigma Prime, a planet so dull it made beige look exciting. The proceedings were about as thrilling as watching paint dry, but Marin and Jax were there to remind the bureaucrats of one crucial thing. Humanity wasn't just going to roll over. As they sat through endless discussions, diagrams, and projections, Marin leaned over to Jax. Think anyone here actually knows what they're doing? Jax shrugged, eyeing the crowd. They look like they're waiting for someone else to make the first mistake so they can point fingers. When it was their turn to speak, Marin stood, her expression the very definition of determined resignation. Look, it's simple. We either adapt, or we become footnotes in some alien history book. We've got to be smarter, faster, and meaner than they are. The key is unity, Jax added, leaning into the microphone. We can't let paranoia tear us apart. Otherwise, the aliens won't need to invade, they'll just watch us self-destruct from a distance. The crowd murmured, a low hum of agreement mixed with skepticism. It was a start, a tiny spark in a sea of uncertainty. Once the summit wrapped up, Marin and Jax found themselves with a moment to breathe. They stood on a balcony overlooking the sprawling city below, its lights twinkling like stars that got demoted from the sky. Do you think they'll actually listen? Jax asked, watching the people below scurry about like ants. Maybe, Marin replied, or maybe they'll just keep doing what they always do. Talk a lot, do a little, and expect everything to work out. Jax chuckled, a sound tinged with resignation. Well, at least we're not the ones writing the history books. Yeah, Marin said, staring into the distance. But maybe one day, someone will look back and see that we tried. Their conversation was interrupted by a message pinging on Marin's comms unit. It was command again, with news that felt like a gut punch. Looks like we've got reports of alien ships regrouping, Marin said, her voice taut. They're not done with us yet. Jax sighed, shaking his head. Why'd I get the feeling we're going to be doing this forever? 'Cause we're the idiots who didn't know when to quit, Marin replied, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. They returned to the Midnight Wanderer, the ship's familiar hum greeting them like an old friend with a penchant for bad timing. The crew gathered on the bridge, preparing for the next round of engagement. Guess it's back to work, Dace said, checking his blaster with a resigned expression. Yup, Marin replied, settling into her seat. But at least we know what we're fighting for. Jax fired up the engines, the ship vibrating beneath their feet as it prepared to launch back into the chaos. Here's to us, the perpetual underdogs. The universe's favorite joke, Tony added, his mechanical grin an odd comfort. As they set course for the next battle, Marin reflected on how much had changed and how much still stayed the same. The universe was vast, indifferent, and unforgiving. But if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was adapting. Finding a sliver of hope in the darkness and holding onto it with stubborn determination. Think we'll ever see the end of this? Jax asked, breaking the silence. Marin leaned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. Maybe not, but we'll keep pushing until we can't anymore. Spoken like a true survivor, Dace said, nodding in agreement. And if we fail? Tony asked, ever the realist. Then at least we went out swinging, Marin replied. With that, the Midnight Wanderer plunged into the stars, ready to face whatever lay ahead. They were battle-worn, weary, and always a little bit sarcastic, but they were also unyielding. Because humanity, for all its faults, had one unwavering trait. It refused to give up. And sometimes, that was enough.